Welcome back to part 2 of the Star Wars Connection podcast, featuring our discussion of the artistic works selected by Lucasfilm for Star Wars Celebration. For parts 1 or 3, please click on the links below. And speaking of the Force and the dark and the light and the stuff of one's soul, we come to the next picture called Rey's Vision by Matt Busch. Now, this one refers to Rey's Force back, and both of you have some great interpretations on it. Do you want to start off, Reya?
When we look at the picture, the first thing we see is this lightsaber, and you have one actual lightsaber, and then you have a phantom lightsaber as well. And this is at Rey's heart level, the lightsaber. So the first thing that came to my mind was an old lightsaber chant that was there in an episode of the Clone Wars. This is not the canon one. This is the old extended universe cartoon, where a Jedi actually chanted this chant during the creation of the lightsaber. I'll just quote it. The blade is the heart of the Jedi. The heart is the crystal of the Jedi. The Jedi is the crystal of the Force, and the Force is the blade of the heart. All are intertwined. The crystal, the blade, the Jedi, you are one. I feel like since it's at Rey's heart level, I feel like the artist is trying to say that the lightsaber and its crystal have chosen Rey. And the reason why we have a phantom lightsaber as well is because maybe the legacy lightsaber has chosen Rey and moved from Kylo into Rey's hands. I also saw something a little out there, a little crazy. So when I looked at the color scheme of the picture, it looks a bit like a rainbow, maybe chakras, starting from a reddish scheme and ending with a violet scheme towards the top. So could we interpret Rey's vision as some sort of opening of her chakras? Her Force vision happened in a very crazy, abrupt manner, and she was startled. So this kind of shocking Force experience, could we draw an analogy between this and Kundalini Rising? Or am I going into too much of the esoteric? I'd like to hear your opinion on this, Felix, because, is this a spiritual journey or an evolution of Rey, an awakening for her?
Yeah, okay. Star Wars is always a spiritual journey. So the Force in the Star Wars universe is conceptualized as sort of this godlike energy. And in real-world traditions, you can think of it as being akin to like chi or prana. And if you think about the Jedi, a lot of people think of Buddhists when they think of Jedi, and that's not off the mark. But, yogis and Buddhists kind of developed alongside one another with their roots in India. And to the extent that if you look at the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, it actually mentions at some point developing powers. So you can really think of Jedi as being sort of like these space yogis. What stands out to me in this art, like you said, is that rainbow that overlays the picture. So this does very much remind me of chakras in the yogic tradition. And so if you get into a little bit of a discussion about chakras can kind of be thought of as these swirling vortexes of energy surrounding each of the major centers of the body. And each is associated with a color of the rainbow, starting with red at the base, and then, like you said, ending with violet or sometimes white at the crown of the head. So especially notable in this artwork is that each rainbow color is sort of associated with a center of Rey's body. So it doesn't quite turn to green, but it's almost like a turquoisey, almost green surrounding Rey's heart center, which would be appropriate. There's blue around her throat. And one aspect of yoga philosophy that this art might be referencing that you also called to, Reya, is the concept of Kundalini Rising. So Kundalini is an energy conceptualized as a snake, like you said earlier, that feminine force. And I would go here too, again, with the masculine, the phallic symbol. It's awakened, and it rises from the base of the spine through each of the chakras until it opens the crown of the head, which is a gateway to enlightenment. So if we recall from the film, when Kylo Ren first unmasks for Rey, we hear that snake-like hissing and rattling. And then during her interrogation, this is the scene in which she first becomes awakened to, or enlightened to, her Force powers. So with this in mind, this piece does seem to call our attention to Rey's awakening to her power within the Force, that mystical energy that penetrates, surrounds, and binds all of life.
I'm going to need a lesson from both of you in Eastern religious traditions, because I missed all of that when I saw this. But I actually and it sounds like you all might be on the mark, and that may be where the artist was coming from. But I actually just approach this picture in light of traditional Star Wars color representation, because there's a lot of blue, magenta, and purple in this picture. To me, the colors remind me of the lightsabers, with the blue being the light side and the magenta possibly being a watered down reflection of the red, indicating a dark side influence, though there are a few true red points in the picture in a few spots. And then purple, of course, is a mix of the red and the blue, so hence a mixing of light and dark. The picture, the whole color scheme of the picture reminds me a lot of that intense scene on the cliffside in the snow fight, where both Rey and Kylo are alternatively illuminated by the blue and the magenta, which in that scene indicated the red lightsaber. And that alternating light on them, to me, represented that they were both in a state of flux between the light and the dark side of the Force. But what I find really interesting is how these colors are situated in this picture. Rey, unsurprisingly, is largely in blue. She's with the light. But look above at Kylo Ren. He is partially blue too. It's just he's darker. That's not surprising until it transforms to purple at his head, like he is a mix of dark and light, which would fit since he's supposed to have a Force composition that is perfectly half light and half dark. But honestly, wouldn't you assume for Kylo to be in a picture like this to have a bunch of red around him? But he doesn't. And perhaps that's an indication that there is more to Kylo than what we have initially been led to believe. And I think that we will find out more of who he is, and his backstory will be revealed in episode 8. But what I also think is crazy interesting is at the bottom of the picture, it's full of magenta and red. Little Rey is magenta, indicating that she was abandoned as a result of some darkness. The ship that abandons her is straight up red. So once again, does this indicate dark origins for Rey? The weirdest thing of all is that Luke is in the magenta section. And when you look at his coloring, and he is made up of completely magenta or deep purple, he seems to have no blue at all, and he's more purple than Kylo Ren. So what does that say about where Luke is Force-wise? What really went down with his students? And what does that say about Luke, kind of looking bad at the end of The Force Awakens?
So just commenting on little Rey being in the red, what I can also see here is an interpretation that calls back to when little Rey was left to survive essentially on her own. And if we're talking about the chakras again, red represents the base or root chakra, which is associated with survival, with fight or flight, with getting our basic needs met. This also happens to coincide with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in which the base level of the pyramid is all about getting our survival needs met. And according to Maslow, we cannot ascend to higher levels of the pyramid in terms of thinking and being until we had the lower levels met. And these are levels like survival needs, like safety. So little Rey was abandoned as a small child and grew up thinking of surviving from one day to the next. But with this need now met, maybe Rey can begin to ascend not only in her Force powers, but also in other areas such as love and belonging and self-actualization.
Isa, I just want to add a little something. You mentioned Luke's state of mind based on the painting. I kind of found that pretty interesting, because there are I saw 3 colors when I looked at the picture, and I'm going by chakras, and the dominant colors in his energy field. I saw 3 of them actually, mostly splotches of violet, but then I saw this dirty, cloudy kind of dark blue and black colors as well. Around him. So if we go by interpreting those, the violet color usually means a person is very spiritual, because that is probably one of the highest point of the highest chakra. So that person would be a very spiritual person, a visionary. He wants to change the world. But the black color I feel is the negative. Are the negative feelings. He's got an unforgiving nature, and this cloudy dark blue color means that this person feels they're in a situation they cannot control, and they're feeling very distrustful at the moment. So I wonder that whether, when Luke, when the Empire fell and he started rebuilding his Jedi Order and tried to help the rebels, did he, in his enthusiasm and zeal to make the world better, his galaxy better, did he take some questionable decisions? Did he make some, do something? I also feel that the dark blue and black colors could be related to the incident of the burning temple that Rey saw in her vision, or maybe even his feelings of anger and helplessness after the incident. One thing we can be very certain of, that Luke looks very disturbed and upset at the end of The Force Awakens when Rey meets him finally. And when they showed the teaser of episode 8, he looks even more disturbed and very upset. So, I think this, that way, if we look at it, the colors on the painting make sense to his emotions.
Well, it's certainly the truth that Luke looks bad. Luke is like that mean old man that you just don't want to mess with. And I think your point is well taken based on what I've read in Bloodline, that Luke's, sleepaway force camp was, not all sunshine and rainbows. There's something ominous in that book about whatever he was doing on his Jedi journey. But getting back to the picture, I love your point, Ray, about the phantom lightsaber as well. And I'd like to add that it's actually flying towards the both of them. But supporting what you said, it has imprinted on Rey with its shadow for now. But what is interesting here is that the lightsaber actually casts an orangey red shadow on Rey. Is this an indication of a dark influence in the vision, or because I think the Emperor's voice was heard, or his cackling at least, or is the lightsaber itself a carrier of some darkness? Anakin did kill all those Jedi with that lightsaber. Maybe something is tainted about it. Earlier scripts had the lightsaber being a big Force relic. We'll see if any of that remains moving forward. And this lightsaber musing is also kind of supported by the fact that though this is Rey's vision, Kylo envelops her, because much of it is his life through that lightsaber, which very much may be actually his. And it's like that lightsaber in this piece seems to have both a dark and a light aspect to it, given that it's been created in the dual form.
Interesting. So the lightsaber could be both light and dark. Sort of like Ben himself being a representation of everyone's potential for light or dark. So now this lightsaber is called to Rey, and she has the potential to either fall into darkness or to rise into the light.
Exactly. And then just a final tidbit on that painting. What is that sun on the ground? Yes, the family ship went into a sun, but do you think that's Starkiller Base, or is that somewhere else?
I'm wondering whether, Jakku itself is an outer rim planet, and we know that the First Order arose somewhere in the unknown regions. So could Rey have maybe when she was young, she witnessed the firing of a prototype version of the Starkiller weapon many years ago? Is she remembering it, maybe? I'm throwing it out there.
No, I like that idea. And I'm a sucker for any kind of Dark Origins Rey. I like that. And also, seriously, Jakku was supposed to be a planet where Imperial experiments were conducted. And Bloodline lets you know that there is something seriously happening in those unknown regions, something dangerous and elusive. And you also get the impression in The Force Awakens that a technology jump has been made here. Yes, it's just a kind of bigger Death Star, right? But the notion of actually draining a star, is new. And didn't some of the Imperials escape to the unknown regions as well? And then you got to think about, what is Snoke? What if he is some ancient evil that has been hidden away? And this, really against nature kind of power that he has comes from where he comes from. Or perhaps where his philosophy comes from. Because remember, he's not a regular Sith.
Yeah, I'm personally really partial to the notion that the sun is Starkiller Base. So, calling it back again to the film, when little Rey watches the ship fly off into the sun, it looks suspiciously similar in shape to the eye of Kylo's helmet, and then it takes on this red hue, like the beam from Starkiller Base. And then later on, Starkiller was reborn as a sun, and the script actually tells us that we witness, quote unquote, the rebirth of a sun, so, no punning there at all. But I think the art could call back to that idea of rebirth, that through his interaction with Rey, who is ascending toward enlightenment, Kylo Ren, the prodigal son, could be reborn.
Oh, wow. When you mentioned that, I've never noticed that the leaving ship is the same shape as Kylo's visor. I have to take a look at that. Because actually there's a whole other podcast about who Rey is crying out to and when she is crying out to that person to come back. Because remember, they called the whole Force back an acid trip. So we don't have very good bearings on the when and where on some of that. And to your point, I really do love the symbolism of Starkiller Base becoming a rebirth of the sun. Sun, S-U-N, and also sun, S-O-N. Because I think that there is a ton of Christian symbolism in what happened on that catwalk and how Han's last loving touch may have sent his son to the road to redemption. But again, that's another podcast. For the next part of the conversation, please click on the link below.